everybody. How are you? Woo! Everybody had breakfast? Good start. Hi, my name is Miki. I'm the CEO of Sempress, and I'm going to give you like 15 minutes quick overview of what is HIP is all about, and then also just a little bit about the things that I'm seeing in our industry. We'll cover some of those in the next 15 minutes, as I mentioned. So let's get right into it. Why HIP? So just to see how many of you already are awake. How many of you have a cloud-only environment? Okay. How many of you have on-prem only environment? Which makes it very easy to understand that the rest of you are probably going to have a hybrid one, right? So that's basically why HIP, Hybrid Identity Protection. That was the whole idea. And back in 2016, when I thought about the conference, actually the way it started, I wanted to go to a conference. But all the conferences that I was looking at were either all about the cloud or didn't have much to say about identity, which I felt is a bit weird because all of the companies that I was speaking with had a hybrid environment. So I thought, you know what, we're probably going to need to have something where people can come together and talk about the challenges of what it actually looks like to run a hybrid environment. And then I reached out to a bunch of people that I know just to see how they will react, and was surprised. They said, yeah, let's do it. So we thought, you know what, we're going to throw out the first one, 2017. Nobody knows nothing about nobody. Let's see how it's going to go. Surprisingly, we had over 100 people coming for the first HIP event, which to me was extremely, I was surprised completely. And I think one of the cool things is that some of the people that came to that first HIP event are here today as well. I'm not going to start pointing out the people, but you know who you are. And it's one of the things that I most like about HIP, that it creates this network environment. I'm not a big fan of using the term family, but it does brings us as a community together where I think, I don't know how many of you know it, but people that are speaking at HIP are actually volunteering. Nobody here is being paid to be on stage. So this is kind of one of the things that I think that make this conference unique. The other thing that is, I think, quite unique about the conference is that I remember seeing in 2017 at the first conference that you would have people on stage that will have very deep knowledge about the topics that they were covering. But you will have people in the crowd that will have as much knowledge as they are, and they would challenge some of the speakers with some of the questions, and the interaction was amazing. So I will actually encourage you all, not necessarily during the session time of the speaker, but make sure that you do interact with the speakers afterwards. There are happy hours, there's a lot of different situations here that you can benefit from basically just speaking to hipsters. They will all enjoy basically having those discussions with you, so do it, all right? That's one of the things. So that's about the Hybrid Identity Protection Conference, making sure that you all understand that networking is one of the best things that you can benefit from here. Make sure that you're speaking to the other attendees and to the speakers as well. The other things that I wanted to cover are more around the trends, and I call those threats, and you'll understand in a minute why, that I'm seeing in our industry on a very, very high level. So the first one, this is to me a very interesting phenomena that have been happening mostly over the last 5 years, and even more so over the last 3 years, I would say. If you think about it, back in the day, so like 5 years ago, give or take, or 10 years ago, identity was this thing that was in some closet in a dark corner that nobody really knew about and nobody really cared about as much, right? It was like, it's up, it's running, it's doing its thing, and that's about it. Fast forward to where we are today, this is why it's so exciting. There is a definition that was coined by Gartner, which is Chief Identity Officer. And as you can see here, they're now predicting that that role will become a peer to a CISO, which is that basically means that identity is getting the prime time, right? The identity people are getting listened to, the identity is getting the attention of the entire management. And we're definitely seeing it across the board. It's not just Gartner. I chose those 2 quotes from Gartner because I think that they're spot on. But we're hearing it across the entire industry. For the last 3 or 4 years, ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response, was one of the, I think, 5 highest trends for every CISO to pay attention to, according to Gartner, and then from other analysts as well. So my main takeaway for you all here, if you haven't done it already, as an identity people, we sometimes started not necessarily on the security space. Potentially we have started on the IT operational space. So if you have not done it already, make sure that you make the connection with the security side of your organization, because identity security have a lot to bring to the companies at the current time. The next one, quite obvious, you can't have a conference today without talking about AI, right? It's a given thing. Here's an interesting thing, though. I don't believe, as some predictions are calling, that AI will replace anybody's job. That's not where I think things are going. But I do think that you need to have a good understanding of AI, and you need to have a good understanding of machine learning in order to be able to do your job better. That's, I think, where things are going. And I think that one of the things that are interesting right now is that if you think about it, AI, ML have been around for years in the cybersecurity space, but something has changed just recently. And that something that have changed is the fact that now it's very easy to adopt AI. It's starting to be much more precise in terms of the results that we're getting. And that's why I think we're starting to see more and more adoption of those technologies in the industry. And my recommendation for that one, first of all, try to think where you can identify use cases of where AI and ML can be applied. One of the things that I'm kind of seeing as an opportunity is those situations where it's very hard for a human to connect the dots. So if you think about something, and just had discussion about it earlier this morning, if you think about something like a password spraying attack, where it's a low and slow type of approach, it can be very hard for us as humans just to understand that, hey, this is a certain pattern that I'm seeing here. If you apply to it machine learning-based technologies, it actually becomes easier, and this is one of the use cases that you can actually leverage ML for. I'm not going to go into ChatGPT, but I assume that you all are familiar and you know what it can do. The one thing that I will mention about technology like ChatGPT or Copilot from Microsoft as an example is that, to me, to some degree, what it can do, it can empower the people in the organization in 2 main ways that, at least from what I'm seeing. The first one, I think about it as the next step of automation. We're all trying to automate things. We're all trying to make things to go easier without us having to click the same button 20 times. AI can help us with that mission. So automation is one thing that I would suggest to look into. The other thing is we all need more information when we're dealing with different challenges. So if you can enrich the data that you have with additional information coming from something like an AI machine, then it can empower, especially if you're thinking about the more junior people in your staff. Imagine all of a sudden, instead of asking you the question, there is something else that they can ask the question to. I think you understand where I'm going with it. So leveraging those 2 trends in order to benefit from the AI technologies, something that I would suggest for you to take a look into. Next one is the non-human identities. In the space of AD, obviously service accounts, this is kind of one of also the hardest trends and threats that we're actually seeing. Now, just a very quick, why is that? Like, what have changed? Very simple. Those have been around there for many, many, many years. What it means is that most likely, the first challenge that you're going to have is to even figure out where they're being used. Which applications are using which service accounts, to what IP addresses those belongs, and basically mapping out where the service accounts exist in my environments, how many do we have. I've seen companies that have over 100,000 different service accounts, and they kind of know where they are and what they're being used for. The second very obvious challenge, service account doesn't have a human behind the account, which means that you can't really MFA the account because there is nothing there to actually deal with it. So that is another challenge by itself. And then the other thing that I'm seeing, because of the service account being deployed in the environment years and years ago, in many cases, the password that was used when that account was set up was relatively what we would consider today to be weak. Reason why is because 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't really care. It wasn't really a challenge for us. Well, it is a challenge today. And then, of course, you come to the last challenge is that changing the password of something that you're not really sure where this thing is running creates a whole different challenge by itself. So that is basically why we see so many attacks now that specifically trying to take advantage of service accounts and trying to abuse those. Quick 2 recommendations, or 3 recommendations in this case. 1, you need to try and map out where do you have service accounts running in your environments. By the way, it doesn't stop with service accounts in AD. I'm starting to see the exact same challenge happening in other IDPs as well. So cloud IDPs are not immune to the challenge of managing the non-human accounts as well. The other one is that I was debating how to say this one, because initially what the recommendation that was suggested was change passwords for service accounts. But with that said, it's not something that you can just easily go and do, right? Because applications will break. So I changed it to plan for password rotation. So start to think of, well, how are we going to go about it? And then, of course, once you have made those 2 adjustments in place, then start to monitor how those service accounts are being used. Very simple thing, as an example, service account should never do an interactive login, right? Because it's not a human. There is no reason why it would use a password as typing it all of a sudden. What IP address is coming from. There is multiple things that you can monitor for to figure out if this is a legit usage or not. This is my last point. Identity-driven cyber resilience. This one is a bit of a much broader story, but I will distill it to something very simple to make, I hope to get my point across. In the current environment that we're living in, it's very different from what it used to be several years ago. What I mean by that, it's not an uncommon scenario for you now when you're sitting in your hotel to potentially open your own mobile device that you brought from home, connect to cloud applications that have information that belongs to the organization. What's the challenge here is that the network does not belong to the organization. The device does not belong to the organization. So there will be some protection, right? I hope, but in most cases will not run an EDR-like technology. The data that is being accessed, meaning the application itself, is running on an infrastructure that you don't control completely. You control just parts of it. So it's all of a sudden, it's a completely different type of a challenge. So that's kind of one part of the problem. The second one is, if you think about the different models of authorization between the different SaaS applications, that's a challenge by itself. In the last 3 months or so, I had 4 different CISOs discussions that described the exact same scenario, which is, to me, was a bit surprising. What the organization did was they connected or integrated Salesforce with DocuSign. For the obvious reasons, they wanted the salespeople to be able to start the contract, the signing process, as soon as they're done with the sales cycle. What ended up happening is that all of a sudden, all of the salespeople had access to all of the documents inside of DocuSign. The reason that didn't happen in all of those cases is because nobody fully understood the permission structure between those 2 different applications, and what is read in this case, what is write in that case, what is the scope here, what is the scope there. So that is actually starting to be a very big challenge, because I'm starting to see more and more organizations trying to connect different cloud applications, and finding out the authorization models not being the same is actually a challenge. And then the last one is this connection between identity, resource, and access, and how those actually come together. To give you a simple example so you understand where I'm going with it. Let's say that you have a group in AD on-prem, common scenario. That group is being synchronized to Entra ID, still common scenario. That group is then synchronized into, let's say, Salesforce. Again, simple common scenario. Then you take this group in Salesforce and you assign a certain permission to that group. Let's say it's a privileged group, role-wise, inside of Salesforce. Great. Now you have something that is monitoring your Salesforce environment. But somebody in the on-prem environment added John to their group that is synchronized and synchronized and synchronized. John all of a sudden became a privileged account inside your Salesforce, but unless you make this connection between the entire chain and the identity, resource, and access, you will miss this point. 2 recommendations. 1, map the identities. Make sure that you understand how each one of those connections actually affects the rest of the organization. The reason I'm calling it identity-driven cyber resilience is that you can actually leverage the understanding of identities to protect the rest of the organization. So this understanding that, hey, this change that you did in AD on-prem, this is the effect on my Salesforce, this is what I think you should be spending your attention and your effort on. The other one, quite obvious, the previous example. If you understand correctly the authorization model and you test it, and by the way, one other interesting thing that I've noticed, SaaS applications and SaaS providers tend sometimes to change things, and you really need to be on top of it. You really need to know that, hey, something has changed, and now it's not the same authorization model anymore. So those are my main recommendations for you all. I hope that you're going to have an amazing HIP conference. There are going to be people here that know about identity way more than I will ever will. And I also think we have a very fun town to spend time in. My biggest recommendation to you all is where I started: network with people. Just go to somebody that you don't know, introduce yourself, and have a quick chat. Thank you all.